Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of The Overlay, a poker podcast brought to you today by Brandon's Airlines from beautiful downtown Vegas. Actually, not downtown Vegas. Vegas Strip Vegas. Vegas. Hey, Brando, what up? You're in Vegas.
What up? I am.
Just cool guy, just popping out. Like, hey, let's just go to Vegas for like the day. Whatever, bro. Not a big deal.
Yeah, they're like, where'd you fly out of, Midway or O'Hare? I'm like, neither. DuPage.
Pew.
Yeah. It was nice.
It is nice.
Flight.
It is nice. I have never experienced said jet traversing to Vegas, but I'm sure it's a good time. What
it was.
What are you planning on playing while you're there?
The standard.
I know it's gonna be
5-5 PLO at the win.
No, not you're not a tournament player, so you're not going to play any tournaments. What casino are you staying at?
The Win.
Oh, the Win.
Yeah, we're back at the Win.
And there's a good 5-5 game at the Win?
There is.
I actually think there's like a meetup game at the Bellagio.
Huh.
Nemi and Owen I think are doing I wonder when it is. Hold on, I'm looking it up. October 14th, the October 17th, October 18th. What's the date today? It's today.
It's today, I think.
Well, Wednesday. I don't know when I'm going to release this. No, actually, today's Tuesday. So I don't know. If you guys get bored, go to the Bellagio. There'll probably be a ton of games going, and then you can get a picture with Andrew Nemi or Brad Owen.
Nice.
And they do have some awesome meetup game over at the Bellagio. So
all right.
Yeah, it's a WPT. Apparently there's a WPT at Bellagio right now. Oh, yeah, the WPT 5 Diamond World Poker Classic.
Yeah, the 5 Diamond's a good one, too.
Dude, I think maybe you guys should sweat some Bellagio games and see what's kind of going on over there. Just throwing that out there.
I've never been.
Or the games in general should be banging, being with the WPT in town, you would think.
Yeah, I was thinking it was just a random Tuesday, but
draw
it's actually pretty good.
People in, yeah. All right, so anyways, hey, everybody, welcome. Overlay Podcast. One of us is in the Midwest. One of us is in Vegas.
West.
And then you come home from Vegas on the same day that I'm flying to Houston to make a Paramount announcement. I'm going to try to do a meetup game down there, too. I'm going to do a little PLO meetup game.
I'm flying in. You're flying out.
Yep.
You flying out of DuPage, too? Or
Nope. Just the Midways.
Just the Midways.
Which is all right. All right, today's episode is episode number 74, Pocket Aces, the fourth toughest premium hold'em hand to play. This is the continuing series on our toughest premium hold'em hands, how to play them better from the overlay, which is basically Brandon and me learning along with everybody else in the podcast. I felt pretty good. I played my first hold'em session at West Chicago this past weekend. I started out really good.
Any premiums?
I did. I didn't get any premium hands, none of the top 6, which would be kings, queens, aces,
jacks, 10s, and ace king.
Jacks, 10, ace king. Okay. So those will put us halfway through the list. And it's aces. Aces are difficult. But I never saw aces. I never saw kings. I never saw queens. I never saw jacks. I never saw 10s. My biggest premium hand was 9.
Probably pretty easy to play for you then.
Yeah.
You picked up 6-5 suited and you tried to bluff straights.
Yeah, that's it. And then occasionally I would get like king jack suited, and I did win a big pot off of Jaime. You would know who he is. You'd recognize his face. I won a big pot off of him. He's like, I don't believe you. I hit my straight in the river, and I was like, I have a flush. It was great. It was so good.
So you booked a winner.
I did. Well, I mean, that's like part of the story. I booked a winner, and then got up, and then went back. And then booked a massive loser.
Yes. The good old.
Now, in all fairness, I did flop. I had A7 suited. I straddled. I think there was a raise to like 15, a bunch of callers. I closed the action, so I called the $7. Flop top 2, which is pretty solid. Gets bet. I just smooth call two callers. There's like a blank on the turn. He checks. I raise on that one. And he snap all ins. It was like he bet 40 into like a $50 pot. I made it 105, and he just snaps all in for like $240.
Huh.
I have top 2, and there is two straight draw, or there's flush draws out there. There's like some semblance of a straight, not there yet, but like could be in a straight draw, could be that. And I'm like, I mean, I can't fold at this point. I mean, he's only got $140 more. Like, I have to call. And not that I wouldn't call with top two anyways. And sure enough, I call. He rolled over, which was nice. Ace king. And I said, I have top two. And then boom, boom. Guess what was on the river?
King ball.
King ball. King ball.
So now you no longer have top two and he has top two.
He has. I have two pair, but his pair is bigger than my pair.
Yes.
And I'm out. I mean, I'm not out. I went from being like a nice winner into nothings. Nothing.
Into Nothingville.
All right, let's talk about aces. How is the number one hand in poker not the toughest premium hand to play? I would think it was
the easiest. I think it'd be the easiest, right?
It's weird. It's
one
in the middle.
Two. It's in the middle.
Yeah.
I think it's in the middle because, first of all, we can skip the whole, if I got 5 bigs, I'm trying to get it in. If I got 10 bigs, I'm trying to get it. You're always, I mean, aces are aces.
Right.
You ain't fold.
That's the hand you're dreaming about when you're at like 12 big blinds or less.
So we can literally skip that whole segment that we did with queens on being scared of stuff, because we ain't scared of anything. The only thing we're scared of is
we king of the jungle.
We're king of the jungle here. So I think that why it's so hard to play is because, unlike all these other hands, there's like specific scary situations that are, swing our equity largely one way or the other, right? I mean, when we have kings and an ace comes on the board, that's like disastrous. It's like no more getting 3 streets of value. Like your kings just shrivel up. Well, there's not really like a singular flop where the aces shrivel up in the way that like kings and queens can do. No. Which, you know what I mean? So
you never really know where you're at.
And that's why it's hard, because like kings, ace comes on the flop. All right, probably
slow it down.
Mean, not probably, but slowing down. You got queens, you got a king high, ace king high board, or just a king high. You can kind of be, weary of these situations and realize that like, okay, we're now like no longer trying to get all the chips and we're just like trying to win a decent sized pot here. You know what I mean? Right. Whereas aces, I mean, it's always kind of just like pedal to the metal until you get met with resistance, and then you're just clueless.
Yeah.
At least, you know what I mean? That's it's kind of.
And then you have to
decide.
You
have to decide.
They have to decide like, how far am I going to take this?
Correct. And I think that is why. And I also think secondary to that is that there's so many different avenues and different ways that people disguise their aces, under rep their aces. It's kind of like the slow play hand, whereas like we just talked about kings and queens, like we're trying to put money in until something stops us. Here, like until a card stops us, right? Like until we see something on the board.
Oh, that's a great point.
Here we're pedaling to the meddling until the player meets us with more resistance.
Right.
But like it's harder to read what like the chips mean being bet from a player.
Ooh,
harder than a card is to interpret. It's very easy to interpret an ace on the turn. It's a shitty card for kings.
Yeah,
a 4 of hearts on the turn. You that card looks fine until somebody's putting in a bunch of money.
I love that with aces or with kings and queens. If one of those overcards comes out, jacks, 10, whatever, overcard comes out, there are no overcards for aces. I know it's stupid to say, but there's no overcards for aces. So you're right. You're not looking at a card that will slow you down. Obviously, wet flops in general. Wet flops, did I use that term correctly?
Yeah, of course.
Wet flops, all spades, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever. Like a super wet flops, like that's going to be cards that are going to be like, okay, I better slow the shit down. Unless you have like the ace of spades and it's 3 spades, then hey, keep going. But I love the fact that I've never thought about how when I have aces, I'm not looking for a card to slow me down on the flop. You're really looking for a player to slow you down.
Right. Because even you just took 7, 8, 9. That's one of maybe the worst flops for aces. Like you still have aces and you're still good a whole bunch of the time. Like when you're not good is when you get raised and stuff. And that's when you get put in these weird spots, which is what makes aces so hard in general. And I think that, slow playing them again is just, I know we're kind of all over the place. We don't really have the structure because we don't really have, we're going to be playing aces from every position on the table, every stack size, and trying to get in all the money all the time. So, I think more aces, it's kind of like, things maybe you should avoid doing, like mistakes you can possibly correct or not get yourself into. And I think one of those big ones is like under repping aces. And it's something that I always still do. And I did when I, played a lot of 1-2 holdem in my early 20s at the Horseshoe. And I really think what kind of sums up why aces is so hard is because you under rep your hand and you trick them into believing that you have something weak, but you really have aces. But then you're met with resistance because your hand's under repped. You don't know if they just think their top pair is good or they actually have you beat. And there's actually no way of like knowing when you under rep your hands. When you limp and when you just call and you're seeing flops multi ways and you're kind of laying in the weeds. That's great and all. You have them fooled, but that can come back and end up playing tricks on your own mind. Because now you got a queen high board, and now they're putting a whole bunch of chips in the pot, and it's queen 8-3, and you don't know if they have eights, threes, or just ace queen because they were doing all the same with those three hands, and you're crushing one and you're losing to a couple, and you have to decipher which way that is, and I think that we can kind of avoid, obviously those spots are still going to come up. But I think we can avoid the whole tricky lane in the weeds, trappy system by just like, we still need to be putting in as much money as we can with aces. And I don't mean that like, oh, when it's on me, I'm going to raise 12 big blinds and just hope I get called. Like that's actually another mistake. You still want to be raising exactly what you would with Jack 10 offsuit as you are with aces. You don't really want to give anything away with your bet sizing, which I think that's a pretty, beginner, what's the word I'm looking for? There's like a beginner mindset that I think most of the people now have understood that. But I mean, again, I think that's one of the mistakes that people make is the whole aces. And you get that sleepy old guy that's been sitting there muck and watching the football game for 4 hours. And then all of a sudden the blinds are 1,000, 2,000 and he makes it 10,000 under the gun.
Right.
Alarm bells. And then he takes down the blinds and he's happy with it. Okay, he shows the aces. I'm happy taking down the pot with how big it is. I'll take the blinds and handies. No, that's terrible. I mean, that you need to be maximizing. Aces are going to be your most profitable hand in hold'em. I mean, they just are. And I mean, you're going to lose big pots with them, but you're going to win big pots with them. Overall, aces are the creme of the creme. So, giving away tells that your hand is too strong is also, a mistake that we want to steer away from, just like laying in the weeds and under repping our hand. There's got to be a middle ground there where we want the opponent to kind of put us on a stronger range when we have aces, just because it makes it easier to navigate the hand from our side of things. That's kind of my beginning of my aces rant here.
Okay.
Do you have any questions, concerns, input?
Yes. Is it ever okay to fold aces?
Well, no. I mean, come on. I mean, yeah. I guess in a satellite when you're running away from the money. And
wow.
if you're in the satellite, and you're on the bubble, and you have 100% chance of making the satellite by just folding. Then yeah, folding is the correct play.
What if you're on the first hand of the World Series of Poker and you flew all the way out there, and the first hand, there's 4 all-ins in front of you, and you look down at pocket aces with 2 players behind you? Is there ever an instance in which case you would say, I'm not going to call here because I don't want to blow my entire $10,000 on one hand and waste an entire trip to Vegas and have to sit on the strip with one of those hooker cards where to try to earn some money back to pay for my hotel room?
I was about to say you're calling for a job, not for.
Oh yeah, no, not the
services,
good times,
no.
right?
I see.
You're calling for
times.
right, yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think that there's
even in that instance you're on team call.
No, correct. And no, maybe there's some people that well, first off, I mean that's just a massive mistake to take all that extra baggage into a poker tournament. But I mean, inevitably people do it. I mean, it's got to be on your mind when you have aces and it's 30,000, all for 30,000, all for 30,000. You're like, shit, I just flew all the way out here to Vegas and this could be it, huh? But I think you kind of say, well, if this is it, this is it, and you're putting it in there.
What a story I get to tell.
Right, what a story. It's a free roll. I either have a gazillion chips in the main event, or I get to say I got out with aces in the first hand. I'm never folding. It's just too strong. You can run the math any which way you want. There's no way the math's going to tell you to fold. So when the math is 100% call, then Brando's going to be 100% call. But
yeah.
I guess I could kind of see it. Like, I'm not going to say you're the dumbest person in the world for doing that if those were the exact situations and that happened for folding. But I mean, it's kind of just personal preference if it's in your DNA to fold aces.
Well, it's kind of one of those things where, like, I say this to people all the time. Like, you played, and let's just talk about completely different cards. Like, you played mediocre cards, Queen 7, suited, and you either flopped a queen, you flopped a 7, or you flopped a flush draw. And there's like a bet and a raise, and then you fold. And I always ask people, why did you call pre-flop if you weren't going to hit part of your hand and then go forward, right? Like,
right, you wanted to hit more of your hand,
right? Like, did you just hope you're going to flop diamonds or flop a flush? What, all queens were going to come out on the board? Like, what were you hoping for it to happen? Where it blows my mind where people don't do it, and I'm an offender of that as well. I've done it where I'm like, man, why did I call preflop and then hit my part of my hand and then fold? That was just stupid. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
So my question, in a roundabout way, with that is, if you have aces and you raise pre-flop and you get called, and then you continue a bet and your heads up, which is great. It's where you want to be with aces, because I think the number one rule that I'm going to throw out there is that when you have aces, you do want to limit the field, right? Like, I don't want to play against 4 people because the opportunities of me losing are significantly higher. That's the only rationale for when people go, well, I would fold aces in the first hand of the World Series for that exact reason, because I want to play against 5 other people. Even though you're a 30% favorite and the largest favorite, you still only win 30% of the time. But
absolutely,
I like that idea. I would always call too. Just, I'm on the team of fuck it, I call. There's no way I'm folding. But
and you did touch on another big, getting to heads up with aces is pretty pivotal. Not, it's not like it's not, extremely pivotal is a bad word, but like it is an advantage to you when it happens that way. And I think you're just going to lose less huge pots in heads up play. I would say that the majority of the time you lose a big pot with aces, it's multi-way. It's a multi-way or it's a cooler. I mean, those are really the 2 spots you're looking to avoid. And getting it down from 4 players to 2 players by being able to 3-bet, as opposed to tricking everybody, laying in the weeds, disguising your aces, it's still only 1 pair. And 1 pair against 6 other cards is a lot harder to beat than 1 pair against 2 other cards. And so any way you can limit the field without, giving away, without telling everybody you have aces. I mean, there's a fine line between, bullying people around and showing strength where people are going to, you don't want them to fold queens. Right. However, you don't want, people to be able to sneak in with their 7-8 suiteds and, all kinds of the queen 10s and the queen 8 suiteds. And that's kind of the flops where they're either going to outflop the shit out of you and you're going to have to play a really big pot, or they're just going to flop nothing and you're going to win a small pot, right? And they always say you either win a big one, win a small one, or lose a big one.
Yeah.
And I mean, we want to win big ones.
Well, I mean, I think that's every poker's dream is just to win big ones.
Win big ones.
That doesn't always happen.
It doesn't. All
right. So
I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, I wanted to get some ideas of, like, do you just kind of pick a line and then stick to it? Like, I'm going to see this the whole way through regardless? Or is there ever a chance in which, like, again, let's say there's no straight on the board, no flush on the board. It's just 5 random cards. None of them are going to make a straight. None of them are going to make a flush. But you can't have 2 cards in your hand to combine into either one of those, which means the only thing you could possibly lose to is a set or 2 pair. At what point in that kind of scenario, which is probably the safest you can be all the way to the river, but let's say I bet pre-flop, got called by 1 player. Bet the flop, got called by the same player. Continue again on the turn, get called by that player. I bet out on the river again, or do I check the river? What do I do in the river at that point? No straight, no flush. I've bet all 3 streets, and now I'm at the river, and it's like, well, shit, he's just cold calling me the whole way. Do I fire, and what do I do?
So I think that is going to depend on the board texture. And I know that's a simple, easy thing to say, and everyone's probably rolling their eyes like, no shit, Bernie.
I'm saying no straight, no flush out there.
Yeah. You need to, like, this is where being able to, define their hand range on the flop kind of helps you out on the river. Mm-hmm. Narrowing down which hands they can have and which hands they couldn't have. And I mean, obviously the Queen 7 deuce flop is going to be much different in your opportunity to get 3 streets of value with aces over the Jack 9-8 turn 7 board, and I think, realizing when you're in when you're in during a hand with aces, I think you need to kind of try and realize how many streets of value you can get against their specific range. And I think in general, it's pretty hard to get a full pre-flop, flop, turn, river, bet call, check call, check call, check call, check call, and you be good with aces. So like the situation you just said, like without knowing what player I'm playing, what the blinds are, what the tournament is, or what the board is, I'm going to tend to just check back on the river with that exact hand as played, not knowing anything else. Obviously, that could change, knowing other things. But I just think it's really hard to get that much value from aces. It is a heads up pot, which is to our advantage. But that's again where we're going to look at the board texture versus the range that they're representing and decide on the flop. Okay, if I'm going to bet this size on the flop, which cards am I slowing down on? Which cards am I not slowing down on? Okay, Bink, it's one of the slowdown cards. Now I know that I'm in slowdown mode, and it's a bad card. It brings in a straight or whatever. You're going to check back and then just call the river. Maybe he bluffs the river and you call, and then you turn into a bluff catcher. That's what's so strong about aces is they're a great value hand. They're also a great bluff catcher. You have showdown value like instantly with aces. Like as soon as they're dealt to you, you have showdown value on the river with them. I mean, barring like, four flushes and five-way straights and stuff like that.
Which makes sense.
Right. It does. So I think that, people in general just kind of like, I have aces. I'm looking at this board. I'm betting because I think my hand's better than theirs, where I think they need to be looking at it more like, all right, what hands do they have here? How much of these hands are flush draws? How much of these hands are beating you right now? When does it make no sense that they could have you know what I mean? Like, then this is again why aces are so hard, because there's no overcards,
and it's the idea of
every turn's a good turn until you get raised,
right? And the idea here is to try to put them on a hand and then figure out where you are, and if you can narrow it down to one or two hands, meaning like the flops king queen deuce, like I can put them on a couple of different cards. Like, do I put them on king queen? Do I put them on jack 10? Do I put them on queen? You got to
ace king, right? And that's the problem. Ace king, you're smashing. Jack 10, you're not so smashing. And king queen, you're getting smashed.
Fudged.
Correct.
Right.
And so, like, realizing
what do you do in that scenario when you pick three hands and you're like, shit, all three of these are either you got great, awful, and kind of in the middle. Not sure what I'm gonna do.
So when you can, like, let's say it's king, queen, deuce, like, and it's rainbow, this is kind of a good example. We need to decide if this is the type of player that's always going to four bet us with kings or queens. Because if they're going to four bet us with kings or queens basically all the time, then, we can eliminate that from your range. Well, that's two of like the worst hands we could ever be up against on king, queen, deuce, right? And then you're going to say, okay, well, they're never getting out of line with deuces here, so you can take away all the sets. Well, now you take away all the sets, and you're like, okay, maybe they have some king, queen suited in here, but maybe they have a lot of ace, king, and ace, queen. Well, there's three hands, and you're crushing two of them, like absolutely smashing two of them, and, you're 70-30 behind against the other one. So being able to realize, maybe we talked about kings and queens. When you get three bet, maybe you can you don't need to pile in that four bet, because then you're going to be getting five bet and putting it all in with kings or queens against aces. Maybe you just smooth call with your queens, and then you flop a queen, and now you're up against aces. So I think the aces part of that hand needs to read the player and the situation on those important hands that have them beat, and if they can have those in their range. Obviously, situational stack sizes, where we're at in the tournament. I mean, that all comes into play. And I think everybody listening to 74 episodes of us has to care about poker enough to, like, navigate through those situations rather well. And I mean, a lot of it's GTO math that, I mean, me and you just really aren't, great in, nor do we study it enough to, like, present you guys with that information. But I do think in general, being able to take the entire situation and make a, calculated decision based on all the data, as opposed to you have aces, it's queen high flop, nobody folds here, pound, pound, pound. Like, those are the people are playing aces the same way, but people, People have the same hand, they have aces, but people look at it very differently. I think you need to look at it more on err on the side of caution, and I don't mean that like not trying to get value. Err on the side of caution, like, okay, when I'm met with resistance, what logically makes sense here and what doesn't.
What could they have? Yeah. How
Right.
often do they have a draw? How often do they flop two pair? How often do they flop a set? How often are they just bluffing here, knowing that I've raised pre-flop heftily, and they're putting me on a big pair, aces or kings, where they're going to try to play back to get me to fold that big pair. They're going to represent, I've got something better than that,
Correct. Can they have Jack 10 on the King Queen Deuce and then just like raise the turn and jam the river when they don't get there? Like, do they have that in them where you now are hero calling with aces as opposed to fist pumping calling with aces?
Right.
That's another thing about aces is like, you really, you don't get to make the flushes and the straights and the big hold'em hands like some of these other hands do. And I don't mean kings or queens. I mean like the Jack 10s and the ace kings and the ace queen suiteds and the king jack suiteds and these fun hands to play. They can make two pair, obviously, but they can make the straights and the flushes. Aces, I mean, if you don't flop an ace, you're really playing a one pair hand or the board pairs and you got a two pair hand.
Right.
So as much as your hand strength is massive, you really don't make many straights and flushes. And when you do, they're four card straights and flushes.
Right.
And the people probably put you and the people probably put you on them.
That's a good point.
So, yeah. So I think the most important thing with aces is realizing, your entirety of your situation and not just looking down at aces and trying to put all your chips in.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just looking at an article and it says to not this one, being too willing. Oh yeah. Mistake number 3, being too willing to go broke post flop in multi-way pots, which is kind of what that is, meaning mistake number 5, overvaluing your hand on scary boards. So also another thing, like, fuck it, I have aces. I can, there's straights, there's flushes out there.
Whatever,
sets,
I got aces.
Like, again, it's just a pair. And it's so funny because when I play Omaha, like, I don't even get excited when I look at aces. Like, there's a lot of times I'll limp with aces, especially if aces with, like, no other cards to go with it, like an ace 7 deuce, no suits. And I'm just like, well, all I got is a pair of aces. So I have a much better likelihood of not overplaying aces there because, again, how often in Omaha does a single pair win?
Not rare to very rare.
Not very often. I mean, it's more likely to happen in hold'em where you're like, I got top pair. Oh, I have aces. I'm good because obviously there's no overcards. But yeah, I think a lot of people overplay aces. I like this. There's it's an article from Upswing. Mistake number 1: slow playing pre-flop. We talked about that. Terrible idea. Don't do it. Mistake number 2 kind of goes with that. Increasing your pre-flop raise size, meaning I've seen so many times where it's like a 1-3 game and a guy's like 25. You're just like, bro, why are you making it 20? Like, nobody makes it 25 unless it's a crazy game with like 7-8 suited that kind of screams big pair. So then you end up getting players playing back into you because you kind of totally labeled the fact that you've got a big hand, correct?
Correct. And then going back to mistake number 1, I mean, the easiest way to play aces is to get it all in pre-flop, right? I mean, like, that's the best way. You got it in good. You get to see 5 cards. You don't have to do any guessing. You get in with aces, you feel great about yourself, right? Yep. I mean, in general, no matter what tournament you're playing, no matter where you're at in the world,
truth,
you're all in with pocket aces, you feel good. You don't give yourself a chance to get it all in very often when you slow play it, when you lay in the weeds, when you make mistake number 1. You're like making it harder on yourself because you give up that huge advantage of somebody piling in 17 big blinds with ace queen suited and you just flipping over aces and it's 91 to 9%. You're like,
right.
This is so easy. Have a nice rebuy there, buddy. So yeah, I think just to chime in on mistake number 1, you don't really give yourself the easiest and most optimal, weapon in your arsenal. Is get it in pre-flop with aces.
Yeah, that's what you want to happen. I like the idea of being careful to, and you talk about this a lot, being consistent with your raises. You got to be able to raise with your bluffs the same amount that you're going to raise with your premium hand. So that way people cannot get a sense of if you're betting big with your big hands and you're kind of baby raising with your drawing hands and your not so great hands, then it's pretty apparent what you're doing. So you got to get that range closer, right?
Yeah. Or just like, make it less obvious. They should be merging. Your range should be merged, right? I mean, the player should have no idea if you have Jack nine suited or aces,
right?
By the way that you act.
Size.
Yeah. Yep.
That's good. No, I like it. We've talked about this. Playing too passively post flop. I think the idea here is you got to keep the gas down as long as it's not a scary board. Obviously, scary boards, are scary, so you're going to slow down. But if not, get it out there and see where you're at, and then try to put that player in a hand and find out what happens. At that point, if you want to check the turn, I think I'm okay with that. But I think you can't bet big and then not flop an ace and just be like, you're not set mining with aces here. Like we're in it to win it.
You need to win other ways besides flopping a set of aces, obviously.
Right. And 9 times out of 10, how often are you going to get paid with a set of aces? I feel like I don't want to flop an ace because then I'm just never getting paid on my set of aces. Unless the guy's on a drawing hand, and then you got to fight the draw. I
know. The only way you're getting action is if they're drawing something else.
Correct. In which case, you could lose. They're on a straight draw. They're on a flush draw. You're like, shit. It's not like it's not very often that the flop's going to come ace, 8, deuce, and you're up against pocket eights, and you have aces, and you both flop a set, and he's like, oh, man, set over set. Like, that doesn't happen. I've never been in a game where set over set happens. I think it's a myth. I don't think it happens in poker.
I did see it once last week at West Chicago.
Oh, nice. So it does happen. It was not fake.
It was actually a really sick one. It was the 9-8-3 rainbow, and it was Marcus's 9s versus Dan the Ghost 8s versus another guy's 9-8.
Ooh.
So it was top set versus middle set versus top 2.
And middle set's never getting quads. That's the worst.
Can't win. Everyone's drawing. And the other guy can't even vote either.
I think that kind of wraps up a lot. Do you have anything else on aces you want to talk about? I mean,
no. I mean, I think in general, it's just it's a tough hand to play.
Yeah,
and it's because it's too big and there's too many ways. And here's another really quick closer: is that when somebody knows you have aces and then a scary card comes and then they meet you with resistance, like it's really hard to continue. And now you're like, you have the best hand in poker. They know you have the best hand in poker, and you still can't win. Because they're just going to, put the pedal to the metal on your worst cards and not give you any action on your best cards.
Yeah.
And, I mean, aces is tough, man. And that's the thing. It's such a profitable hand. But, I mean, again, you don't get it in pre-flop, and you're kind of guessing and you're weaving, and you really need to use all of your tools in your book besides the fact that you have 2 aces in the hole to win a big pot.
Yeah.
And you're going to be put to tough decisions, and it's going to be one pair a lot of the time. And when it's multi-way, that just makes things even harder. So try to avoid that. But like I said, if I have any advice with aces, it's get it all in pre-flop.
Make the pot as big as possible, as fast as possible, and then that's it.
And then that's it. And then you just said that the bigger that you make the pot, the smaller the SPR is, and the smaller the SPR is, the weaker of a hand you need to stack off. And aces is never really going to miss that cutoff when you get the SPR high and when you get the SPR low enough. When you get so many chips in the pot that you don't have that much left behind in your stack, it doesn't really matter what happens with aces. You've already succeeded in the fact that you're getting the rest in. So the board doesn't matter so much. And so you've already succeeded, even though you only got half your chip stack in. You really don't care. It doesn't matter if it's coming 9-8-7 or if it's coming ace-8 deuce. Like, the rest of the money's getting in there, and that's a success. Even though sometimes they show up with Jack 10 and flop a straight, and you say GG. You still succeeded. You made theoretical chips, and in theoretical money, I am a multimillionaire. In real dollars, not so much.
Not so much.
I blame aces for that. They're tough.
Yeah, they're not easy. They're not easy.
But at the same time, every single time you sit down in a poker tournament, you hope to look at the ace of diamonds and the ace of spades and say, here we go. So just try and get those chips in the middle, guys. I mean, I think that's about it for aces. I mean,
I like it.
That's the thing. There's no structure. Big pots fast. And, think through it when you're met with resistance.
Oh, hold on. I got to write those down. Wait.
Yeah, and don't just blast off like you have the stone cold nuts.
I'm a blast offer.
Because when you start blasting off and then they know it and they got the trap set, there's no coming back. Those aces are going down with glory.
They go.
I'm ready to start gambling. So whenever you're ready to end this, that'd be amazing.
Yep. Go gamble. In fact, everybody, stop what you're doing and go gamble. If that's at CCG
Yes.
Poker, if that's at Paramount Social Club, or wherever you get your poker.
When is this coming out? Is this coming out on Thursday?
I think I'm going to put it out. I'm going to put it out Wednesday night. So
Okay.
you want me to put it out Thursday?
Kind of, because I want you to just be like, oh, well, Kenny's in Texas.
Right.
Brandon's at
Come
home.
and see me in Texas.
He's in Chicago.
You're right. I will release it Thursday morning. So everybody,
Thursday events
if you're listening to this right now,
ways.
CCG's rolling. If you want to play a $20 early bird, great. You want to play a $150 deep stack? Great. You want to play cash games? Brando will be there. Hey, are you in Texas this week? So am I. Come and see me at Paramount Social Club, where I will be dumping money left and right. It's like a meetup game, but better because I'm a fish, and fat fishes are called what, Brandos?
Those are the whales.
Yeah, I'm a pretty fun whale. I entertain the other fish. I'm a whale who entertains fish. I have a great time, and I'm a terrible poker player. You can quote me on that.
Is there like a whale in Finding Nemo that's like very friendly and like, talks to the other fish and,
Maybe.
shows them around the ocean?
Yeah,
Because
like-
if there is,
Like
that's you.
even when Nemo and Dory get swallowed in that movie, spoiler alert, by the big ass whale, they spit him out later. What was the whale's name in Pinocchio? Do you know?
I don't know. No.
It's like a popular question.
You know what's dumb is I was going to ask what the whale's name was in Free Willy, but I think his name's Willie
Yeah, because otherwise he wouldn't.
because they're trying to free him.
Right. The whale's name in Pinocchio is Monstro. Monstro eats
Monstro.
Pinocchio and Pinocchio's dad, and then he spits him back out. Basically what happens for Ken when he plays poker.
Right. Even when
I eat
when you eat the
I'm gonna
fish and
spit
you
it back
stack
up.
them, you're gonna
Don't worry about it. It's coming back. It's never going away. There is no lock 'em up in Ken's. There's just zero locks in my game. There's nothing. I'm prepared to dump them all at all times. Thank you for listening to The Overlay. Make sure you find us on Twitter at The Overlay Pod, POD. Check us out wherever you...
underscore.
No underscore.
No
Just
underscore.
that, The Overlay Pod.
Love it.
Come and see us this weekend. This is a fun episode. I'm excited to do the last three, which is going to be Pocket Jacks,
Oof.
Ace King, and Pocket Tens, the last three premium hands in our premium hand series. And Lord knows, if anybody has any suggestions, hit us up on
Right.
Twitter.
Because as these hands get harder to
They're
play,
so hard.
it's harder to lay out a roadmap on how to play when the roadmap has 20 different turns. And you can kind of see we're adding, theoretical turns here, and I'm air quoting. Kings, there's not that many turns. And when I say turns, I mean, there's not that many. What am I saying with turns?
I don't know.
With kings and queens, there's very few different ways you can play, and it's very easy when you see something bad happen. With aces, not so much. With ace king, even less as much. And then jacks and tens, I mean, you can go any which way you want to go with tens, and we'll get there. And jacks, and they're just so hard to play because every hand's kind of a mystery and a coin flip, and you really have to be polished in all of your other skills. In order
Plus,
to
there's
play
less
those hands
there's
good.
less saving face that if you get knocked out of a tournament with tens, people look at you like, "What are you, an idiot?"
Tens, right? It's
You
like
get knocked
it's
out of a
one pair
tournament
and
with
it's the fifth
aces.
pair.
Right, you lose with aces. People are like, "Oh man, bro, that sucks. You had aces and you lost. Yeah, I had aces. You had aces. Yeah, aces. Wow, that sucks, man. Yeah." But if you're the guy on the other hand who goes, I four bet with tens and then jammed on the flop,
Which was queen high, and,
And
the guy
then
had
lost to
ace queen. I run
kings.
bad.
right?
Yeah.
No, you're just bad. Anyways, thanks for listening. Catch us next time, and hit that share, like, and subscribe button. We'll see you next time.
Farewell, guys.
Farewell.